Today on the Everything Maybe podcast, we'll be discussing the Call of Duty franchise announcing a brand new movie in development with Paramount and the legacy of video game movies, so feel free to stick around. What's up, everybody? My name is Ryan, and welcome to Everything Maybe, a show about society, pop culture, and everything in between. Real quick, if you want to join the conversation, leave a comment on wherever you're listening to this podcast, or you can also send a voice message to speakpipe.com/everythingmaybe-pod. All right, so today's topic is all about Call of Duty, which normally we don't always talk about video games on this show, mostly because for me, it's not really. It's funny because I always have different things that I'm into. Video games is definitely one of them, but it's not necessarily something that I'm always talking about, only because a lot of the games that I play personally are AAA stuff we're talking. Or I wouldn't even say Riot has AAA games, but things like Valorant or Fortnite, Call of Duty here and there, which is funny because I'm talking about that now. Or just some of my niche stuff. Like I love the Batman Arkham series. That's kind of the main things that I kind of play. Story games. Hitman is another one I've played before. But other than that, it's kind of like if it catches my interest, I'll play it. Otherwise, I'm pretty much playing the same stuff all the time because my friends do, right? So that's kind of why I don't typically talk about video games on this show. But the reason why that we're talking about video games on this episode is because, just in case you didn't get it from the title or the intro, if you skip those, the reason why the Call of Duty is in entertainment news right now is because Call of Duty, one of the games that is the most iconic in gaming culture when it comes to revolutionizing online games, playing online with other people, things like that. It's one of the most iconic of all time. It's finally heading to the big screen, which is something that a lot of people have been asking for years. And the announcement comes as part of a broader shift in Hollywood, with gaming IPs are becoming major players in film adaptations. We've seen a lot of them come out, and maybe not even just film. We're not even talking about movies anymore. We're talking about shows as well, which I'll get into that a little bit later, if that works a little bit better too, where it's like some shows are going to work a lot better than others, or some video games are going to work as shows better than movies, at least in my opinion. But we will get to that soon. I at least kind of want to go over what's been announced, what hasn't been announced, what can we expect, things like that. So in terms of what's been announced, Paramount Pictures, which has had, at least as of recording this, has been combined with Skydance, which is now making this Paramount Skydance. It has struck a deal with Activision Blizzard, owner of the Call of Duty franchise, to develop, produce, and distribute a live-action feature film based on Call of Duty. Now, a little bit of background about the game. I don't think most of you really need to know anything about the background, other than that the game's franchise over the years has sold over 500 million copies worldwide, and has been the top-selling video game series in the U.S. for 16 consecutive years, which, honestly, I'm shocked, because in a lot of ways, I mean, as somebody that does play video games on a semi-regular basis, I don't typically buy Call of Duties anymore, mostly because in a lot of cases, it's kind of the same game reskinned. I'm sure, there, and at least in recent years, they do offer, things that keep it going, such as battle passes or skin lines, things like that. But the game isn't the same that it used to be, at least for me. I think the last Call of Duty that I officially bought, at least recently, is Black Ops 6. But that's part of the problem with the series now, is that they're constantly trying to rely on past games or past series to just at least keep the name of Call of Duty going. But then when they try something new, fan bases don't like it, because it's something that just straight up does not work for the franchise. When they introduce a new movement that I guess now Fortnite has definitely revolutionized, but when they introduce new movement in a game like Call of Duty, sometimes it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work, only because it's like, when you're trying to play the game, you're trying to have this realistic vibe, run and gun, while also combining that with running on walls, just becomes unfun. So I guess, at least for me, I'm shocked that it's already sold 500 million. But at the same time, people like, I guess, especially in today's market, people like buying the same thing over and over again. It's the same with like franchises like NBA 2K. Same game every year, just reskinned, and they claim, oh, well, there's new features on the island or whatever they call it now. But other than just releasing new rosters and maybe a brand new my player story. Is there anything different? I'd find the same, at least issue for me with Call of Duty. But that being said, I mean, at least for when it comes to what the CEO of Paramount has to say, which also leads to Skydance as well. He spoke and he said he was a lifelong fan and calling this project a dream come true. And also some leaders at Activision, what's the word? They emphasized the desire to deliver visceral, breathtaking action that honors what fans love while also appealing to newcomers, which I'm not sure about visceral, breathtaking action, especially when the entire game is in first person. I think the only time that you're ever going to have breathtaking action is going to be in the campaigns, which some fans have admitted that they haven't played a campaign in years. So you already waste a lot of resources trying to come up with a new campaign every year, and even I don't even, as far as I know, someone can correct me in the comments, but I don't think Black Ops 6 even came out with a campaign, and if it did, I didn't hear nothing about it. And I have the game. I bought the game. So, but I mean, I was only there for the multiplayer and zombies anyway, which most of the fan base is. So I don't really know about breathtaking action from a film standpoint because when the entire game is in first person, there isn't a lot to go off of when the game was never built, or at least maybe at the beginning it was, but as the years have gone by, it's never really been built inside of realism or the action being something that could be breathtaking only because we're dealing with game mechanics, we're not dealing with visuals, right? But that being said, that is what's known about it. There isn't a lot that is known about it. We don't have a director, cast, or release date. I mean, I can't even think of anybody that could really, I guess, sell me on seeing this movie either. I did hear some rumors about Steven Spielberg potentially being involved. That might be in the dust at this point, only because I mean, with Steven, at least with him, as he directs, he does demand, not really demand, but I think he's earned a lot of creative control, at least by his peers and things like that. And I think Activision slash Paramount was a little bit scared by that because they kind of want to control the narrative. And the only director that I can think of that I could trust would be Steven Spielberg, because I mean, he's made a bunch of different things. That I feel confident in saying that this was something that captivated me, regardless of if it was a video game, movie, television series, right? I think he just is a talented storyteller, and regardless of what you give him, I feel like if you gave him any video game, Super Mario Bros, Sonic, I think if you gave him like Flappy Bird, he could make a compelling story out of Flappy Bird. Granted, that's very bare bones. I mean, that's a challenge, but I'm confident he could do it. And I know that Flappy Bird isn't on the same level as Call of Duty, but my point still stands, right? But that's kind of the only rumor I've heard for our director. But it's also what's unclear about it too. So of what we don't know is it's unclear which era of Call of Duty we're kind of going for. Like, are we setting this in World War II? Are we setting this in the Modern Warfare era, Black Ops, or are we going to do something original? We don't really know. And that's kind of where some of the backbone of this movie falls apart for me. Because if you're going to claim that, oh, we're going to stay true to, the visual, or sorry, or the visceral, breathtaking action of the game, which part are we talking about, right? Because if we're doing, let's say, advanced or infinite warfare, that I think to me anyway would be the most visually appealing because people are running on walls in that game and everybody complained about it except me because I thought it was cool. But still, people are running on walls with advanced tech and lasers and all this stuff. That would, to me, would be the only interesting thing about Call of Duty at this point, because if you do a live action Call of Duty, what's stopping it from being your average war movie? What would stop it from, at that point, not being a video game movie anymore, right? And if we don't pick the right era, then the game immediately becomes boring, at least to me, and I feel like a lot of the audience, at least from to my knowledge, maybe, and at least to my research, would also feel the same, right? We also don't really know anything about budget, scope, or like whether this is going to be just something standalone, blockbusters, some are heavy, or if it's part of some sort of larger universe, whether they do, multiple films or TV series. It hasn't really been detailed, but it has been rumored that this opens the doors for potential to have multiple series adaptations, or even just more film franchises in general. Um, but I think with all that being said, I think the reason why that this matters to me, and at least for the reason why that I wanted to talk about it, is because, like I said earlier, the deal did follow from Paramount's recent merger with Skydance, which gave the studio more firepower for big ticket IP adaptations, i.e., Call of Duty. So it does fit into the trend with current Hollywood right now, which Hollywood is increasingly interested in gaming properties because of their built-in audiences. So, the Super Marios of the world, Fallout, The Last of Us, right? These have cult followings to them as it is. So when you have a built-in audience, it allows for more global reach and then has the capacity for spectacular action storytelling, right? Now, in terms of where we're at now, we have the recent now we have the most recent successes like The Last of Us, Fallout, and to a lesser extent, I didn't really want to mention this, but Minecraft is also part of this trend. Now that's a whole other can of worms, maybe even a separate episode. But where Minecraft is still relevant is because it's a part of the problem when it comes to video game movies. And that problem is that Hollywood fails to make a good cinematic experience because they fundamentally misunderstand what makes a good game versus a good film, right? I'll give you an example, right? Video games and cinema can both create a cinematic experience, but the main difference between them is how they create the cinematic experience, right? For example, at least for me, I would define the cinematic experience as an escape through storytelling, right? And video game developers have this very unique way to tell the story by relying on the consumer to physically feel the story from what they are physically doing from the controller in their hand, right? From their POV, or they can even make this happen with third person, because if I'm in control of my own story, I can explore more. I could try to open doors that maybe the devs didn't want me to open, right? Or maybe there's a secret cheat code back in the day, right? But when it comes to transitioning that type of feeling into filmmaking, it's on the creator, the filmmakers, to cause a feeling rather than invoke one, right? So this is why films like Uncharted or Hitman don't work, right? Because while Uncharted does have the cutscenes in the games, which, as someone that has played Uncharted, I forgot to mention that earlier, I played Uncharted, all 4 games, especially with Uncharted 4 being my favorite in the series, that had the most authentic cinematic experience, whether it was in the cutscenes, which the cutscenes were long in that one. Like when I first played that game, I was just sitting there. I didn't even have the controller in my hand. Sometimes I would just put it down and just sit back because it was that enticing and that inviting into the story. So then when it got to a point where me controlling Nathan Drake was just to get to the next cutscene. I didn't care who I shot. I didn't care what I found. I didn't care about the extra stuff to explore, because the game developers really took time to make sure that the cinematic experience is with what I was controlling, right? But the movie, on the other hand, right? It kind of like the main experience in the movie is kind of just banking on you kind of already playing the games, which to a certain extent, if you're trying to make this accessible to multiple different audiences, then you kind of have to make this on a general standpoint, right? If you only have 2 hours to introduce me to the character of Nathan Drake, maybe this should have been a show then, right? Because the character of Nathan Drake has so much lore to it across 4 games that they were able to flesh that out because they had 4 games to do it, not 2.5 hours with Tom Holland, right? And that's no shade to Tom Holland. I think he did fine in the movie, and I think it was a decent casting for a young Nathan Drake. Sure, if you look by sides, sure, but at the same time, the film just doesn't have enough time to do it like a game does, right? And it also, I did mention Hitman. It's the same with Hitman. Hitman, I think, is, to a certain extent, a lesser cinematic experience as a game, but the feeling of the story is still there. You're playing as a hitman with different tasks and different consequences to your choices. That's still telling a story, just again in a different font. That's what I like to say, right? Um, but even then, with the story, it still is in the consumer's hands with the games, and it's similar to the campaign modes of Call of Duty games. The most well received ones being Black Ops and Modern Warfare. Um, and plus, Uncharted the film, it also doesn't only invoke the same feelings of adventure and risk as the games do. It also intentionally ignores the source material. Right? I'm okay with retconning certain things. I'm cool with that, but when you're ignoring certain things like when characters meet or when they find specific treasure in hopes that it makes a better story, at that point, why'd you make the movie? Because then at that point, the game is going to do that better. I've always said that Uncharted 4 is a better cinematic experience than the actual cinematic experience that I saw on a big screen, right? It seems that only video games, in terms of visual media, it only works in series form because shows like Fallout or The Last of Us captures the magic of the games. And I think the series fundamentally work better because video games allow for more details to be shown. And the only other way for details to be shown on a larger scale is by breaking it up into episodes like television can, right? Which is why Fallout and The Last of Us do so well. They're able to spend time with characters longer. It allows for people that haven't played the games to actually feel something for the characters that are being introduced, right? Um, so when we get to the points of like let's say Uncharted, Hitman, Assassin's Creed, hell, Minecraft. Minecraft as a movie, like it doesn't give the same courtesy to the characters that we know of, especially with something like Minecraft. It had such potential to do literally anything else. It the way that I could have seen the Minecraft movie working is if they did basically like a someone just wakes up one day with no memory and now they're forced to survive on this island that they don't know. That sounds like a movie that we all know. I'm not going to say it because obvious, but the point I'm making is that it could have been that, just Minecraft related. And sure, you could also introduce other characters. Um, and that's where you can create characters, sure. But that's the only way that I can see a movie like Minecraft working. And instead, they were just like, well, let's just put Jason Momoa in it and Jack Black and hope for the best. So, you know, but again, it's not fleshing out the characters enough for my taste, right? And it also seems another way to make a decent video game at this point. Not video game. A decent video game adaptation on the screen is by completely ignoring the context, which I know I said that we shouldn't be doing that, but what I mean by that is you're taking a video game character and then making something completely different. A perfect example of this is the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Take that as an example, because certain characters have a very vague or very niche origin for it. So, they can make changes to characters and no one bats an eye. Donkey Kong as a character in the games mostly says unga bunga and does nothing else, right? I mean, he might clap and run on all four of his legs, cool, whatever, not legs, but all of his limbs. That's what I was gonna say. He does that, says unga bunga, maybe eats a banana and then goes home, right? But they were able to do something in the movie by completely just changing his character because they can. There's no other lore that we really know about him other than him having a son potentially, right? So making him this spoiled rich kid type character fits because what else were you gonna do anyway? Right, making Mario an actual plumber is the only thing that makes sense for the movie. It's because the game of Mario, there's so many iterations of it and so many different versions of who Mario is that you can basically just make Mario the character whatever you want. The Sonic movies do the exact same thing. I mean, granted, I think they do it a little bit worse, but I don't hate the Sonic movies because it's not trying to be something that it knows it can't be. Right, so putting Sonic in the real world to me is fine because what else were you going to do with that type of character? At least it at least allows for something more fun to where we're not expecting something that's true to the games, because how can you stay true to the games when the original games themselves have a video game story, sure, but it's really hard to translate that to screen. So why not just take the character and do what you want? We shouldn't have bullied them into changing the design of Sonic. Actually, yes, we should have. That I don't condone bullying, but that was the right time to do it. But the but the point is, a video game character like Super Mario is just has so many vague and diverse titles that they pretty much can pull from any Mario game and spin it into something new, right? For example, I think a new Super Mario Galaxy movie was just trademarked. I got to check sources on that, but I think it was just trademarked, which opens up new possibilities for a sequel that they already set up in the first movie. Now, granted, they're probably going to run with Yoshi being a main part of the second movie because they did tease that at the end of the first one. But still, I think having Super Mario Galaxy be a decent sequel, hell, like they could still put that in, I guess, the Mario video game world that they already built, but just now in the Mario video game world, now they can go into space. Because again, if you already built the Mario world to be somewhat realistic in a cartoon by basically humanizing Mario and Luigi, even though, you know, they they stomp on turtles and maybe fix some pipes every now and then, right? So, if you can't really do that in a real world and you put that into their video game world, that's where they can go into space and stuff. I don't know how Bowser fits into that, but not the point. My point is that opens up so much more, right? And I mean, hell, if you also pull from what other franchises have done, Mortal Kombat failed by not only ignoring some of the lore that Mortal Kombat already offers, but they also try to introduce new characters that aren't even in the games. Or they also try to give us characters that honestly none of us have any interest in. Right? Like, I mean, the mainstays, we're talking about, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Katana. I'm cool with seeing those, but pull from like a deep cut and do something like Omega from some of the older Mortal Kombat games. I couldn't beat that man when I was a kid, but and then also hold on, I'm watching some of y'all on TikTok beat Omega like it's nothing with just Scorpion. I thought you could only beat Omega with Omega. Anyway, not the point. I'm getting off topic. The point I'm making is you could have pulled from more obscure characters that are only in niche games, or even then, there are some new characters in some of the newer games that aren't in the classic versions, but they have stories, they have lore inside of the newer games, and instead you gave us something that none of us can really care about, right? So, I guess with all of that being said, right, Call of Duty as a game, there isn't much to pull from. But then also you could pull from campaigns, right? Again, some of my favorites from the campaigns, which is funny because the Black Ops series is the best in my opinion. Some people could say Modern Warfare, whatever. I'm sticking by my guns on that. But I would say some of my favorite stories from Call of Duty campaigns are Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2. They could pull from those, but then also it's getting to a point where I'd rather see a movie like Super Mario Bros. Where they kind of just take a character and run with it. But then that's the only universe that you could really take a character, run with it, and nobody bats an eye, right? So I guess what do I hope to see? I don't really know, because again, Call of Duty as a franchise is very hard to pull off in today's film and television world. I mean, do you translate the cinematic elements from, again, the campaigns? Do you try to create a brand new story within the Call of Duty universe? But then also, how do you create a new character in the Call of Duty universe without also giving context to literally anything? Because again, if we're trying to make this be, action packed and fun to watch, I guess is what I'll say. How do you do that without just using characters that are already in campaigns? And also, again, speaking of realism, right? What are we going to do for that? Because are we going to include the absurdity that is Call of Duty logic, right? I mean, there's too many question marks here, right? I mean, because do I get to see people run and gun headshotting people? And also, does it only take like 5 bullets to officially get a headshot? Like, do we keep that? Do we lean into the absurdity? Do we lean into the realism? There's so many question marks there, because if you lean too much into realism, now is it really a Call of Duty movie, right? Because then what? Again, like I said before, what is stopping this from being, just your run of the mill war movie now? But then if you lean too far into the absurdity, into the goofiness that is Call of Duty, now you can't really take it seriously as a film, right? So I guess I think I would fit. I think I have something that would fit both requirements, where it's still you could still lean into the realism that is the game of Call of Duty, but then also have the absurdity. And I think the way to do that is it's just making a Call of Duty Zombies movie. I know that that is a exclusively Black Ops only thing. I know that's not in the other games, but I would be interested in seeing kind of the lore aspect of zombies in the Call of Duty world, right? Because when you load into a zombies match, in the loading screens, in like what's the one I'm looking for, like map designs, you can kind of get a glimpse of what was happening, but no one really cares because we're just here to shoot zombies, right? Um, and then even then, there are some games where they also kind of start to have a story almost because it would get boring every year, every couple of years, and we're like, here's a new Black Ops game. Okay, it's time to shoot some zombies, right? Like I can understand them already because again, they do have stories built inside of them, but they're also some of them have mystical stuff involved where it's like we got like flying zombie bugs and hellhounds and all this other shit that first of all, from a game perspective, fuck those. And and also too, how would you make that work in cinema? I don't know. But I think if you go into, let's say, a lore movie about how zombies came into the Call of Duty world, you can take any Call of Duty character and then run with it like that. Maybe somebody specifically from the Black Ops 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever campaign, one of those characters, and then run with it that way. Because then it could be, let's say, your state of the art war movie, right? Think this is a bad example, I guess, but like the most wartime movie that I can think of in real time is Transformers from 2008. If you make that the vibes, right? But then once they come home from whatever thing that they were fighting is where maybe some sort of like chemical weapon was dropped during the war, and the side effect was that there are more and more zombie genes popping up in different people, right? So then as it starts to take over the world, this has started to become Walking Dead. That's not my point. The point is, if you're gonna make a Call of Duty movie, all right, lean into the zombies. I think the only way to make something entertaining while still making it a video game movie that isn't cringe, right? If we go into the origins of how the zombies went, I think that can make it interesting, but that also I think leaves um some cool potentials for a third act, right? Now that all the zombies are here, now I think we can actually get creative with now switching into first person visuals, right? I'm not saying overdo it, but at the same time, let's say someone gets fatally shot. It switches to a first person view where everything starts to fade into black. Maybe like we can change the color visuals, and we could put the camera specifically to where like the only thing you see is legs and crawling back. I don't even think. I mean, maybe if you want to lean into the absurdity aspect, you could also have a serum that they could only use once that could heal them. Not even from like, I wouldn't even say from gunshots, but maybe like an adrenaline hit if it's not too fatal, something like that. Again, it's Call of Duty. At the end of the day, nothing about Call of Duty has any sort of realism to it for the most part. So this is allowing you to have the creative freedom to kind of just do whatever you want with the zombie aspect, because zombies aren't real, to my knowledge. Let's hope they're not. I won't survive. But zombies. Hopefully this ages well. But the point is, zombies aren't real. So take that and run with it. And if anyone at Activision and Paramount takes this idea, run me some at least just I'm asking for like even like 2%, because like let's say this thing makes $1 million. That math is mathing, but that is a lot of dollars. All right, so I'm asking is for 2% if you're gonna take my idea. But this is the only way I think the movie is gonna work. And granted, I'm not working in Hollywood for a reason. Maybe there's smarter people that can bend audiences to their will. But at the same time, I just don't want to see another Uncharted. I don't want to see another Baldur. I don't even think Baldur's Gate has a movie, but I just don't want to see another video game movie just fail because filmmakers don't understand anything about what goes into making a game, right? Because video games are so cool because you're in control for the story. Stories like Deathloop or any of the Batman games, like I said before, I think again when you are in control of what Batman is in day in day out, and then you see the like the devs be creative and be like, okay, well, how does he use this gadget? How do we really overuse the Batmobile in our best game in the series? Unfortunately, you know what I'm saying? Like you like you can at least see where the creativity is of how the game is going to work while still telling a story. And I think you can still do that with a movie of Call of Duty, but I think we really got to look into the pros and cons of what to do. And I think zombie movie is going to be the best. But what do I know? I'm just a guy in a basement with a podcast mic. So that wraps up this episode of Everything Maybe. Again, another short one. But comment down below what you think. Do you think a Call of Duty movie would even work? Do you just not play enough games? So at this point, you're just going to see it regardless. Let me know what you're thinking, either in the voice message or in the comments on whatever you're watching. But that wraps up this episode. Yeah. Other than that, hey, any sort of links are going to be in the description for SpeakPipe, for speakpipe.com, Instagram, TikTok, all the doobly doos are in the description. And other than that, I think that's all I got. So I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.